Margaret Qualley smoothed out the wrinkles in her simple blue dress as she stepped into the Grand Plaza Hotel. Her heart was pounding with excitement. Today was a special day, her daughter Anna's wedding. No matter what had happened leading up to this moment, Margaret couldn't help but smile. The hotel lobby was breathtaking. The floors were polished marble, and a huge crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, sparkling under the bright lights. It was exactly the kind of fancy venue she had expected from Peter's family. They had expensive taste, and they wanted everything to be perfect.
Mom.
Anna's voice called out across the lobby. Margaret turned and saw her daughter walking quickly toward her. Anna wasn't dressed in her wedding gown yet, just her regular clothes. That was strange. Margaret had expected her to be upstairs, getting ready by now. "You made it," Anna said with a smile. But something was off. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and her shoulders looked stiff, like she was carrying a heavy weight. Margaret knew that look well. Anna was nervous about something. "Of course I made it, sweetheart," Margaret said warmly. "I wouldn't miss your big day. For anything." She opened her arms for a hug, but Anna hesitated and took a small step back. Her eyes darted around the room like she was checking if anyone was watching. "Mom, I need to tell you something," Anna said, twisting her hands together. Peter's family, they made some last-minute changes to the seating arrangements. Margaret's stomach sank. She had been expecting something like this ever since Peter's mother, Rachel Timothy, had taken over the wedding planning. Rachel had been controlling everything, barely letting Anna make any decisions. "What kind of changes?" Margaret asked, keeping her voice calm. Anna swallowed hard before answering. "They moved your seat to the back near the kitchen entrance." The words came out fast, like she was trying to get them over with. "Rachel says it's because of the photographer's setup, but..." Anna stopped, unable to meet her mother's eyes. Before Margaret could say anything, a sharp voice interrupted them. "Anna, what are you doing down here? You should be in the bridal suite right now." Margaret turned to see Rachel Timothy striding toward them, her high heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. Her expensive jewelry sparkled under the lights, and her sharp eyes swept over Margaret with obvious disapproval. "Oh," Rachel said in a cool tone, "you're here?" Margaret straightened her back and forced a polite smile. "Hello, Rachel. The hotel looks beautiful." Rachel's lips curled into a thin, fake smile. "Yes, well, we wanted everything to be perfect for Peter and Anna." Then she turned to Anna. "Darling, your hair appointment was scheduled for 11 minutes ago. You don't want to keep everyone waiting." Anna hesitated, glancing at her mother. "Mom, I'm really sorry about..." Margaret placed a gentle hand on her daughter's arm. "Go on, sweetheart. It's your special day. Don't worry about me." Anna gave her a sad look before hurrying away toward the bridal suite. As soon as she was gone, Rachel's fake kindness disappeared. She turned to Margaret, her voice dropping to a cold whisper. "Listen," she said, her tone sharp and cutting. "I know Anna wanted you to be here," Rachel said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "But let's be honest, you don't belong in our circle. The Timothys have a certain image to maintain." Margaret took a deep breath, keeping her voice steady. "I'm here for my daughter. That's all that matters." "Yes," Rachel replied, tilting her head slightly. "And you can support her from the back of the room." Her smile was sharp, almost cruel. "We wouldn't want your modest background ruining the wedding photos. I'm sure you understand." Margaret clenched her hands at her sides, but didn't let Rachel see how much her words stung. "Oh, and one more thing," Rachel added, her eyes glinting with amusement. "We've made some special arrangements. The staff meals will be served at your table." It seemed appropriate. With that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving Margaret standing alone in the massive hotel lobby. For a moment, Margaret let herself feel the full weight of the humiliation. She had worked so hard for Anna, picking up extra shifts at the hospital as a nurse to help pay for her daughter's education. She had stayed up late, quizzing Anna on medical school entrance exams, her heart bursting with pride when she had been accepted. And now, Anna was marrying into one of the wealthiest families in the state, the owners of the biggest hospital network. And suddenly, everything Margaret had done, Every sacrifice she had made meant nothing to these people. She swallowed the lump in her throat and made her way to the ballroom, where the wedding would take place in just a few hours. The room was breathtaking. Large crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling, their light reflecting off the elegant tables. Fresh flower arrangements filled the air with a sweet fragrance. A small orchestra was setting up in the corner, their instruments gleaming under the lights. But as Margaret walked toward the back of the room, her chest tightened. She saw it, her table. It was tucked away behind a large pillar, almost hidden from view, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. Mrs. Qualley's? A voice pulled her from her thoughts. Margaret turned to see a young woman in a hotel staff uniform approaching her. "I'm Maria, from Event Services," she said with a kind smile. "We were told you'd be seated here." Margaret nodded. "That's right." Maria hesitated, lowering her voice. "I just wanted to say, all of us on the staff, we know who you are." Margaret frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Maria glanced around before continuing. "My sister was in the hospital last year. County General. She told me about that terrible night, the crisis when there was that huge highway accident. You worked for over 30 hours straight, saving lives. She was one of them." Margaret's eyes widened. She remembered that night well, the chaos, the exhaustion, the determination to keep going despite how much her body wanted to give up. We don't think it's right, how they're treating you," Maria said softly. "And we want you to know, you're not alone. If you need anything at all, just ask. The whole staff is on your side." For a moment, Margaret stood there, her heart swelling with unexpected warmth. Then suddenly, a thought crossed her mind, an idea that could change everything. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, her lips curling into a small smile. "Actually," she said, glancing up at Maria, "there is something you can help me with. But first, I need to make a call." Margaret took a deep breath and dialed a familiar number. As the phone rang, she kept her eyes on the Timothy family, who were moving through the ballroom, giving orders and making demands. Rachel was at the center of it all, waving her hands dramatically while scolding the staff about some tiny detail in the table settings. Finally, the call connected. "Hello, Noah? It's Margaret Qualley," she said calmly. "Remember that favor you owe me? I think it's time to call it in." Noah didn't hesitate. "I remember, Margaret. What do you need?" Margaret smiled slightly. "I'll explain everything. Just be here in an hour." The next 2 hours passed quickly, filled with activity. Margaret stood in the shadows, watching as the ballroom filled with guests. The people arriving were dressed in the most expensive designer outfits, their jewelry sparkling under the grand chandeliers. She noticed how the Timothys greeted each guest with big smiles, over-the-top hugs, and fake air kisses. But whenever their eyes landed on Margaret, their warm expressions disappeared. "Is that hers?" Margaret heard a woman whisper to Rachel. "The mother who works as a nurse?" Rachel responded just loudly enough for Margaret to hear. "Yes, unfortunately. But don't worry, we've made sure she's out of sight. Nothing will ruin Peter's big day." Margaret glanced at her watch. Any minute now. The first sign that something was wrong happened subtly. Maria, the kind young woman from the hotel staff, along with 3 other servers, quietly stepped away from their stations. They reached up and unbuttoned their uniforms, revealing their regular clothes underneath. Without a word, they walked straight through the ballroom and toward the exit. Rachel's sharp voice cut through the chatter. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded. "We haven't even served the appetizers." Maria turned around, her head held high. "We quit." A stunned silence spread through the room. Before Rachel could react, more staff members started doing the same. The bartenders packed up their tools and walked away. The valet attendants at the entrance abandoned their posts. Even the wedding coordinator closed her laptop, tucked it under her arm, and strolled toward the door. Guests looked around in confusion, murmuring to one another. Rachel's face turned bright red with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped. "You can't just walk out. We have a contract." A deep, commanding voice spoke from the doorway. Actually, the voice said, "They can." Heads turned as Noah Beck, the CEO of the luxury hotel chain, walked into the ballroom. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere. He was a man people respected, and even Rachel, who always acted like she was in control, looked momentarily stunned. Margaret watched with quiet satisfaction as Rachel's expression shifted, from fury to confusion, and then, as if on instinct, to forced charm. "Mr. Beck," she said, quickly walking toward him. "There must be some mistake. We booked this venue months ago." Noah simply raised a hand to stop her. "Oh, I know," he said smoothly. "And now, the staff is following my direct orders." He turned to face the room, his voice loud and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen," Noah said, his voice strong and clear, "I sincerely apologize, but the Grand Plaza will not be able to host this event today. All staff have been instructed to stop working immediately." For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, chaos erupted. Guests began murmuring in shock. Peter's father was shouting about lawyers, demanding an explanation. Rachel's face had turned ghostly pale. And poor Anna, she looked like she might faint. "Mom?" Anna's shaky voice reached Margaret's ears as she pushed through the confused crowd, making her way to her mother's side. "What's happening?" Before Margaret could answer, Noah turned and spotted her. His face broke into a warm smile. "There you are, Margaret." Rachel's had snapped toward him so fast that Margaret almost expected her to fall over. You know each other's?" Rachel stammered, her voice filled with disbelief. Noah let out a deep, amused laugh. "Know each other? Rachel, Margaret Qualley saved my daughter's life last year. She diagnosed a rare condition that every other doctor had missed. She stayed by my daughter's bedside all night, monitoring her personally. Thanks to her, my daughter is alive today." The room fell into an even deeper silence. Guests exchanged uneasy glances as they realized what was happening. Noah turned to Margaret and spoke with sincerity. "I told you back then, anything you ever needed, anytime, just ask. And I meant it." Margaret could see the horror dawning on Rachel's face. The pieces were falling into place. She had tried so hard to push Margaret into the background, only to realize too late that she had insulted someone far more respected than she had ever imagined. But Noah wasn't done. His voice carried across the ballroom. "Margaret Qualley is not just a nurse. She sits on the board of directors for our hospital group's charitable foundation. She has helped direct millions of dollars in funding to underprivileged communities. She has changed lives." When she called to tell me how she was being treated at her own daughter's wedding, he shook his head, his face hardening. "Well, let's just say the Grand Plaza does not associate with that kind of behavior." Anna's eyes filled with tears. She turned to her mother, her voice breaking. "Mom, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever tell me?" Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand gently. "Because I wanted you to find your own path, sweetheart. I never wanted my connections to influence your choices. But," she paused, looking around the room, her voice firm, "I also won't let anyone treat us like we're beneath them." Rachel's shrill voice cut through the tension. "This is ridiculous. You can't just shut down our wedding. Do you have any idea how much we spent on this?" Margaret turned to her calmly. "Oh, I'm not shutting it down." She nodded toward Noah, who gestured to the waiting staff. The door swung open, and fresh serving carts rolled in. A new team of waiters, dressed in crisp uniforms, entered the ballroom, taking their places. "I'm taking over." Rachel's mouth opened, then closed, but no words came out. Margaret continued, her voice unwavering. "The wedding will go on if Anna and Peter still want it to, but under new management, and with new seating arrangements." Peter, who had been silent until now, finally stepped forward. His expression was filled with guilt and shame. "Mrs. Qualley," he said, his voice sincere, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea my parents were treating you this way." He turned to Anna, his voice thick with regret. "And I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you and your mom sooner." Anna looked at her fiancé, then back at her mother. Tears streamed down her face. "Mom, I'm sorry too," Anna said, her voice full of regret. "I should have spoken up." Margaret gently shook her head. "No more apologies," she said firmly. "This is still your special day. Let's make it a good one." She turned to the guests and spoke clearly. Anyone who wants to stay and celebrate Anna and Peter's wedding is welcome. But in this room, everyone is equal. Here, we are all family. What happened next was incredible. The Timothy family, now embarrassed and humbled, quietly moved to the side, no longer controlling the event. The other guests, who had been tense under Rachel's judgmental presence, finally relaxed. People started smiling, talking freely, and enjoying themselves. Anna, no longer weighed down by pressure, looked radiant. She stood tall, pride shining in her eyes as she looked at her mother with gratitude. The wedding ceremony, though slightly delayed, was now filled with real emotion. It felt more meaningful than it ever could have been before. As Margaret took her seat in the front row, she noticed Maria, now back in her uniform, catch her eye and wink. Margaret smiled back, thinking about how different this day had turned out from what she had expected. She realized something important. The best way to get revenge wasn't by getting even, it was by standing tall and proving your worth. But there was still one more surprise waiting for everyone. As the reception began, Margaret sat back and watched the room transform. The tension was gone. The string quartet played softly, and guests mingled freely, finally enjoying the celebration without worrying about social status. At a table near the kitchen doors, the very spot Rachel had assigned to Margaret, Rachel herself now sat, looking completely defeated. Her husband, Jeremy, kept glancing at his phone, probably trying to figure out how much damage this day had done to their social reputation. For a brief moment, Margaret almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Then, Peter approached her table. He looked nervous but determined. "Mrs. Qualley, could we talk privately for a moment?" Margaret nodded and followed him to a quiet corner of the ballroom. Peter took a deep breath before speaking. "I wanted to tell you, I've made some decisions." Margaret raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Peter, that's not necessary." "It is," he interrupted gently. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. I went into hospital administration because my parents expected me to, but," he straightened his shoulders, "I don't want to manage hospitals from behind a desk. I want to go to medical school like Anna. I want to help people directly, the way you do." A warm smile spread across Margaret's face. "Anna never told me that." "I never told her," Peter admitted. "I was afraid of disappointing my parents. But after seeing you today, how you handled everything with such strength and kindness, I realized I've been trying to please the wrong people." Before Margaret could respond, Noah Beck suddenly appeared beside her. "Margaret," he said, his voice full of excitement. "There's someone here who wants to speak with you." He gestured toward the entrance of the ballroom. Standing there was an elegant older woman. Margaret's heart skipped a beat as she recognized her. Dr. Joyce Heiser, the state's health commissioner. "Margaret Qualley," Dr. Heiser said warmly as she approached. "I'm so glad to see you. I made it, even if I'm a little late," Dr. Joyce Heiser said with a smile. At their table, Rachel and Jeremy Timothy had been watching closely. The moment they realized who had arrived, they nearly tripped over themselves rushing over. "Commissioner Heiser," Rachel said in an overly cheerful voice. "What an unexpected honor." Dr. Heiser didn't even glance at her. "Save it, Rachel," she said coolly. "I'm here to speak with Margaret." She turned back to Margaret, her expression warm. "The board meeting is next week, but I wanted to talk to you in person. We've reviewed your proposal for the new community health program, and not only are we approving it, we're doubling the funding." The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Rachel and Jeremy's jaws dropped at the same time, their shock clear for everyone to see. Dr. Heiser wasn't finished. "And more than that," she continued, "I'm retiring next year. The governor has been asking me for recommendations for my replacement." She looked Margaret straight in the eyes. "I'd like to put your name forward, if you're interested." The ballroom went silent again. Everyone was straining to hear the conversation. Margaret felt Anna's hand slip into hers. She hadn't even noticed her daughter had come up beside her. "Mom," Anna whispered, her voice full of emotion. "You never told me about any of this." Margaret gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "I've always believed that our work should speak for itself," she said softly. "All those nights when I was working extra shifts, I was also building relationships, creating programs, and finding ways to help more people. I never cared about recognition. I just wanted to make a difference. Dr. Heiser nodded. And that, she said firmly, is exactly why you're perfect for the position. Rachel looked like she might faint. Her face turned pale as she stammered, but she's just a nurse. Dr. Heiser raised an eyebrow. Just a nurse, she repeated. Margaret Qualley has done more for healthcare in this state than your entire family's hospital network. While you were planning fancy events and worrying about social status, she was actually saving lives and changing the system. Peter suddenly stepped forward. Commissioner Heiser, he said with new confidence, I'd love to learn more about the Community Health Initiative. I'm planning to apply to medical school.
What?
Rachel gasped. Medical school? But you're supposed to take over the family business. Peter turned to his mother. No, Mother, he said firmly. I'm going to make my own path, just like Anna did. Just like Mrs. Qualley taught her to do. The reception continued into the evening, but it had a completely different feeling than anyone had expected. The Timothys remained at their table, defeated and silent, while Margaret found herself surrounded by guests eager to hear about her work and vision for the future of healthcare. As she watched Anna and Peter share their first dance, Margaret smiled to herself. She hadn't planned to humiliate the Timothys or prove anything to them. She had simply refused to let their prejudice make her feel small. Maria appeared at her side with a glass of champagne. You know, the young server said with a grin, when my sister told me about the nurse who saved her life, she said you were some kind of angel. I think you might actually be a ninja, Maria joked, handing Margaret a glass of champagne. Margaret laughed, accepting the drink. Sometimes the best way to win isn't by getting even. It's by standing tall and letting people's actions speak for themselves. Later that night, as the reception was winding down, Anna found her mother alone on the hotel's terrace. The city lights stretched out in front of them, twinkling against the dark sky. Mom, Anna said softly. Margaret turned to see her daughter standing there, her wedding dress flowing in the evening breeze. But in that moment, Margaret didn't just see a bride. She saw the little girl who used to fall asleep reading medical books, dreaming of becoming a doctor just like her mother. Anna took a shaky breath. I'm so sorry, not just for today, but for everything. I pulled away from you, trying so hard to fit into Peter's world. I forgot who I was. I forgot everything you taught me. Margaret reached out and pulled her daughter into a warm hug. Sweetheart, you never have to apologize for trying to find your own way. She pulled back and looked Anna in the eyes. But always remember, your worth isn't in who you marry or what family you join. It's in what you do, how you treat people, and the difference you make in the world. Anna wiped a tear from her cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. I know that now. More than ever. She paused, then gave her mother a small smile. Health Commissioner Qualley? Margaret laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Why not? Anna grinned. After today, I believe anything is possible. They stood side by side, looking out at the city together. Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. The Timothys had tried to put her in her place, not realizing she had already built her own. A place of respect, dignity, and real achievement. The next morning, Margaret's phone buzzed with a message from Noah. The staff can't stop talking about yesterday. You've become a legend at the Grand Plaza. Margaret smiled as she typed her reply. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living your truth and letting others learn from it. As she set her phone down, she thought about the long journey that had led her here. Years of hard work, quiet dedication, and staying true to her values had built something no amount of social status could break. The Timothys had only seen her as a simple nurse. They never realized that every life she saved, every program she started, and every relationship she built had created a legacy far more valuable than their shallow wealth. In the end, she hadn't needed to ruin them. She had only needed to stand strong and let the truth shine for everyone to see. And as she got ready for another day at the hospital, commissioner nomination or not, she smiled, knowing one thing for sure. The greatest victory isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right.